when it comes to actually leveling up all these left behind regions, there are many, many different competing ideas and ways in which you can do to, again, level up all these left behind regions. However, they all, all of them need one fundamental thing. That is, of course, cash to invest. If you ain't got the cash, none of these wheels are going to start turning. You can't, even get them to move a single thing unless you start to pour the cash in. And here's the thing. We've said this before many, many times. You look at other countries who have done this and have spread out their productivity to like other areas to improve these, again, other areas, Germany being a key example. It works. We know it works. But the problem is that we've got a Tory party who is obsessed with the single idea that London is the key economic driver of the UK, and so it gets the money. It gets constantly all the money. And then places like the North just have but a fraction of what London gets to spend on transport. But as we've said multiple times in all the other videos when we've covered this thing, transport is key. Without things like the HS2 or even upgrading the lines or getting the other Northern Powerhouse Rail, things like that, we ain't got a chance. And here's the thing: if you invest, we said this before with again, we're on with Gareth Dennis in the interview. The last thing we said, what a lot of people don't realize, if you actually invest, if the government actually invests in this area, it's not just thrown away money. That money comes back in the form of taxes, mainly in the form of taxes, back to the government. So it is. It is on the government to do this, but they just will not do it. And we've seen this through the Levelling Up report. But of course, as we said at the beginning, there are lots of different ideas about this. And one of the key things is productivity. Now, if you look at any productivity chart around the UK, you will see that the UK is pretty much one of the lowest active producing countries in Europe. In fact, as I think, again, this is again a shocking statistic, but I've said this before, all the European manufacturers could go on holiday in like October and then start again in January, and the UK would have barely managed to have caught up to their European counterparts. So again, just goes to show you how important some of these key things are. So we're going to go to diving into this article here, which goes into productivity about, again, being a key driver to actually helping to level up, but also understands the key point: you can't do this unless you're ready to put the cash into it. So before we do get into this article, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So on with this. So this comes from Prospect Magazine with the title of "Productivity is Key to Leveling Up." The government's white paper sets out an ambitious agenda to level up deprived areas, but requires a very laser-sharp focus on productivity if it is to actually succeed. Productivity output per hours worked is the foundation of prosperity and life chances. Higher productivity, which requires investment in both labor and capital, raising living standards through higher wages and assets. Those assets are not just financial or real estate, but also intangible ones like skills or social trust. As a high-performing country such as Germany show, a more productive economy needs sufficient fiscal firepower, as well as a coordination and cooperation between national, regional, and local levels. After unification in 1990, the fiscal transfers from West to East Germany totaled about £700 billion a year. Over nearly 30 years, this reduced 40% productivity gap to about 15%. It's massively boosted the worse off massively boosted off the worst areas and let out the outer per person in certain Eastern German regions, and now exceeding that in certain Northeast English regions, where, according to the research by the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, productivity is less than half of that in London. This fact alone just shows how broken the British economic model is. The fact that just is stuck in a vicious cycle of low investment, low productivity, low skill, and low wage and low growth. UK productivity growth has completely flatlined since the 2008-2009 financial crisis. Since then, according to those figures published by the Office for National Statistics last month, output per hour was the second lowest amongst the G7 advanced economies. And the NISA forecasts also over the period of 2023 to 27, the economy will just grow by 1.25% per annum. None of this, which is, of course, helped by the over-centralized system of governance, where local levels lack the decision-making powers and resources that are concentrated in currently Westminster and Whitehall. London and the other metropolitan areas, such as the southeast as Cambridge or Oxford, are doing well enough, but the rest of the regions are falling further and further behind. For over a decade, we have seen the deepening disparities between the regions on a host of measures, from income to asset inequality to life expectancy. People in suburban, rural, and coastal areas in the Midlands and the North are doing a lot worse than those living in the urban metropolitan areas in the South. The Levelling Up White Paper is a good start, and I'd argue it's not a good start at all, to try and tackle some of those inequalities. But the government has to implement 3 reforms which are vital to substantial regional regeneration. First, a long-term strategy that combines a holistic approach with the right scale of investment instead of a patchwork of policies and endless churn, as we have seen for far too long. This means number 10 will have to completely overrule the Treasury's refusal to commit to new spending. The first instance of the 3 billion pledged on skills over the next 3 years is not much a skills revolution, but even a barely returns the expenditure to the 2010 levels. A quick win is to simply triple the funding for HE and FE colleges in the deprived towns such as Grimsby, Southend, or Blackpool, places that voted for Brexit, because after decades of neglect, the people who live there want an economy that also benefits everyone. The government could also start to bring together businesses, trade unions, local government, and provide sufficiently more apprenticeships and more vocational entry opportunities to the labour market, especially in areas of short skill shortages such as health and social care. Adults need lifelong learning grants too, as part of a system of education and training that goes well beyond the sticking plaster of skills boot camps. Second, the UK is in dire need of some institutions with a long-term outlook that can boost the greater investment, and especially capital investment, in the productive activities such as high-tech manufacturing jobs and high-tech service jobs. The National Insurance Bank, located in Leeds, is a beginning, but more than the infrastructure projects are needed to regenerate our regions. Financing energy-efficient, socially affordable housing, providing assistance to small businesses, and help with export finance are just some of the examples of how the National Development Bank has been supporting thriving economies like Germany and South Korea. The point is not to pick winners, but rather to help to unlock the greater private investment. Third, the regional regeneration has to involve local design and delivery. Knowledge about the local needs and the cooperative advantage is key. The accountability to local citizens, the greater powers to metro mayors and the new mayors announced in the Levelling Up White Paper are necessary, but they are not sufficient. Local councils need more decision-making powers and resources that are indeed independent of the Treasury. The current system of the partial business rate retention is far too limited, and the benefits of the already affluent parts of the country. While the government pledged back in October of 2021 budget to increase local government expenditure by 3% is welcome, it does not even begin to compensate for the cuts that have happened since 2010. The rising costs associated, obviously, with social care and the full business rate retention should be considered as a share of income tax receipts. And of course, local government is emasculated and emancipated, lacking the power and its resources to try and address the deep gaps in the local and regional capital markets and labour markets. And it's little wonder that over 2/3 of all foreign direct investments and venture capital flow into London and into the metropolitan southeast. The UK has one of the poorest productivity performances and highest inequalities among the ODEC 38 advanced economies. Regenerating our regions requires decentralising the economy and governance system. If policymakers do return to the same economic structures of the post-pandemic, they failed to resolve the productivity problem of the pre-pandemic, then the UK is set for another decade of low skill, low wage, low productivity, and low growth. We must and can do better. So I mostly agree with those 3 points that were said there. It's what is generally needed, but of course, it's all about, as you may have got the point there, it's all about spending the money. And if the government ain't prepared to spend the money, then these areas ain't going to get a thing. Now, those 3 key things there, I completely agree. I think the education, getting more apprenticeships out there, fantastic. The current apprenticeship the way apprenticeships works are absolutely awful. They're mostly hoovered up by very, very large companies. And at the end of the apprenticeships, most of the apprenticeships do not actually get continue into full-time work. Again, that's just how bad our apprenticeship skills is when you've got medium and small companies that are crying out for these types of skills and these types of apprentices. And then, like I say, they're just hoovered up by the large corporations, and the medium and the small companies that could massively benefit from these apprenticeships don't even get a look in. So that is definitely something that needs changing. And of course, giving monies to the colleges, fantastic. But again, you need to give money. And again, giving more money and spending power and decision-making process to like local councils and local regional mayor authorities would be absolutely great. But again, they need the money and the power to be able to do it. And of course, this government ain't, shall we say, prepared to do that, because what happens, for example, if, as we've seen very recently, the only, shall we say, regional mayorship is held by in the North Tyneside by a guy called Ben Houghton, I believe his name is. You can compare the rest of the regions, and overall, most of them are run by Labour mayors, and those regions have seen quite significant changes, except for the one run by Ben Houghton, who's putting all his money and all his chips on getting the Freeport done, and somehow the Freeport is going to help his area. But again, Freeports don't really do that. They do not bring the economic advantages that they are purported to bring. Like I say, there was a reason why David Cameron was responsible for, shall we say, closing down the last lot of Freeports that we had in this country. But there you go. So that's that then. Please do let me know what you think about those 3 key ideas. Like I say, it's always important to discuss these ideas, especially if you are in one of those areas or if you are involved in apprenticeships. It's very, very interesting to hear people's opinions about that and what happens in those areas. But of course, like I say, as always, please do remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. And of course, we'll see you all next.